Hey there, Alex Kidman here with just a really quick video, which honestly, as of about 60 seconds ago, I wasn't really planning to make, but I had a query today from a viewer who commented that I got the price wrong on something, and because the device was so much cheaper, my review was wrong, I should look back at it. I should redo the review because it was wrong. Now, I wanted to address that. There's a couple of different angles to it, but the first thing I want to say straight up is I do not mind getting constructive criticism. If you've got some constructive criticism, send my way. That is totally fine. I do not pretend that I'm flawless. This is not about that. But first and foremost, the first most obvious point I've got to make. I'm an Australian, if the accent didn't give it away, and the prices I list are in Australian dollars. And I very commonly will get criticisms that I'm getting the prices wrong because the US price is this or the US price is that. Well, guys, I'm not dealing in American dollars. End of story. Okay, but with that out of the way, what about the issue of dropping prices? Why don't I re-review phones when they become that much cheaper? Well, the fundamental simple issue here is that in 99% of cases, I actually can't, because the phones that come into me are loan phones. They've gone back in the meantime. And while I could readjust a written review for a video review, I'd have to reshoot it. And honestly, I'd want to then compare it against the other things that were available at that price point, at that point in time. And it would be a never-ending cycle, because prices, especially on Android phones, always drop. Much less common in the iPhone space. Apple basically doesn't give the retailers margin for new phones. If you're talking older refurb things, yeah, you can get a bit crazy there, but that's a very different market. Some big, interesting challenges there. But the prices on these things are always dropping. They are also always, just to get back to my point about prices, internationally variable. Sometimes the specifications are variable too. So what I am working from are the Australian specifications as advised. And this is why I will always review something based on its original retail price here in Australia, not anything else. I just go off, here's what the retailer wants for it. Sorry, I should say, here's what the manufacturer wants for it. The retailer's the one selling it to you. They've got their markup too, maybe. But here's what you're paying for it, is I guess what I'm trying to get at. And this is where it sits in the value matrix relative to that. So I'll always try and compare it against what you can get at that point in time in Australia for that money, for that kind of phone, to give you an idea of, right, well, where does it sit value-wise? But of course, this also brings up a really obvious point of advice. As an individual phone gets cheaper, yes, its value goes up generally, as long as, of course, it's not, a 4 or 5 year old phone where, in fact, for the price drop it's had, you might be able to get something that was substantially better. You still have to look around. It still pays to do your research. But once prices start dropping on Android phones, and typically, we all know, that's about 6 months, sometimes less, but 6 months after they've come out, you will typically see a pretty big drop in the price of a given phone. Then for the following 6 months, you'll see maybe a few more slices taken out, because most phones, or most phone series, tend to upgrade on about an annual basis. So for example, while I reviewed the Galaxy S25 Ultra earlier in the year, and it was quite a pricey phone, it's now a fair bit cheaper because we know within the next 5 months or so, the S26 Ultra will appear, and we can expect its price to drop, and that makes it a better value phone. That does change the equation. It does not necessarily change my review though, and it's just not a practical thing to do, because I'd never actually do any new reviews. I'd just forever be producing things on old reviews, and at a certain time, at a certain point, they'd lose that kind of relevancy. Now, I realize there's probably about 3 people who've watched through to the end of this little ramble, but it was a point I just felt like I just had to make. Thanks for watching.